about 30 seconds or so, a minute or so.
Yeah, it's good. You've had a busy day.
Yeah. Got my water. Hello, everybody. This is Scott Roberts with Explore Scientific, and today on Explore Now, our special guest is Ray Kahn from Kahn Scope Center. Ray and I have known each other for a long time. I don't know how many years that's been, but I bet it's going now on 30 years. Um, and Ray is in Toronto, Canada, in uptown Toronto. And I've been to his shop many times over the years. Um, and Ray has served the astronomical community now what? It's been over 40 years, right?
I've been in the industry for over 40 years, long time. I don't
Long
know where the
time,
time.
long time. So I think this is maybe the first time. I don't know if you've ever done a live broadcast from inside of your store before. Is this a
This
first time or?
this is this is probably the first time. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, it's long overdue, I think. So, but we got a great signal right now, which is awesome. And uh, you know, uh, so Ray, how do you get started in astronomy? I mean, a lot of people get started as maybe pretty young in age and get an interest. Is your story similar, or what's your story here?
Well, I was born in London, England, and when I was a kid growing up, um, we of course had the Greenwich Observatory, which wasn't too far away. I lived in central London,
Oh, wow.
so I remember taking a school trip out to that observatory, and I was intrigued by all the various instruments and the technology, and looking at the history. And I think that was really sort of the first spark. And
Yeah.
then in 1969, when the Apollo mission, the lunar mission, happened, that was kind of the second big spark. But right at that time, my parents decided to emigrate to Canada from London.
Oh,
So I moved to from London to Toronto, and so I kind of lost the interest for a little bit, steered away from it
hmm.
until I ran into, of all people, Peter Saravolo.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And
Peter and I are friends. That's
well,
that's a great guy to run into.
and I honestly can't remember how we met, but we used to hang out together and socialize, and we go in Peter's basement. He had a stacks and stacks of books and magazines, and he was very avid on
Oh, yeah.
astronomy. He was
Still
really
is.
into it.
Yeah.
But we had some other interests too, so we socialized and went to different events, and talked more about astronomy, and yeah, it was great. And then things moved forward from there.
Right. Just before I get too far in this program, we have Ansel Puri, who is who's calling in. I think Ansel is from India, so he can correct me on that, but I believe he's actually viewing from India. Jay Murphy is on there. He says Jay Murphy says, "Love me some ES Live." That's great. And Gary Palmer from the UK. So your home country is there. Gary
Right.
says he lived in Sutton on the outskirts of London for 40 years. So, but you're only 40 years old, Gary. So anyhow, so let's move on here. I have not been to the Greenwich Observatory. I visited the UK only once, and it was to go to. Now I've been to the airport and stuff on the way back home from somewhere, but to really be in the UK was uh, very exciting for me. I got to see. I visited a company called Zico, and they make high-end computerized polishing machines. And they were polishing a segment of the ELT mirror that was there. So I got to see that being done. And you want to talk about some very advanced polishing techniques and stuff like that. England has a long, long history in this. So um, with not only telescope building, but outreach, astrophotography, all the sciences, is really cool. You go to the natural history, or not the natural history museum, but the history museum in London and see what's there. There's scientific instruments. It's really cool. So I can see how that really burned in a lot of interest at a very young age, so that's great. Um,
Well, well, yeah, we also have here actually in just north of Toronto at the David Dunlap Observatory, 74-inch reflector that was manufactured in the UK and shipped over here in the 30s. And it was at one time the world's largest telescope for a very short period of time. But that was manufactured by a company in like something on the Tyne, but a British company manufactured it, shipped it over here, put it together, and it was absolutely brilliant. And
sure.
it's no longer operating as a professional observatory, but it's been run by the Royal Astronomical Society as a public outreach
No,
facility. Yeah, so
it still
it's been
serves as an inspirational. Probably undergrads use it and that kind of thing. That's true also of a lot of the historic observatories in the United States. Mount Wilson, Lick Observatory. That those observatories in that historical range. Um, thank God they're still running. Yerkes was shut down for a little while. Now it's back up. So. Um, you mentioned something about a telescope shop with someone named Bob in Richmond Hill.
right. Now, this was interesting. This kind of preceded. So the first start of my career was at Efston Science. At that time, they were called Edmunds Scientific Products because Evan Efston really gets credit for getting the telescope industry in Canada going.
Hmm.
In the early stages, he opened up a retail telescope shop not very far from where we're located, just a couple of streets over, and started importing Edmunds Scientific Products, and
Okay.
became a dealer for those products. And but I found out that prior to him opening that business, that there was another gentleman up in Richmond Hill, which is where the Dunlap Observatory is, actually about 30 minutes north of Toronto, who had a machine shop, and this gentleman manufactured telescopes. And I came across a catalog somehow that he published, which listed all these different reflectors.
Yeah.
Well, apparently he was really good at making telescopes and manufacturing them. He wasn't very good at finishing them and delivering them. So um,
Okay.
it
Well,
became a
that's
bit of a
just a little side note
yeah,
there, huh? Yeah.
yeah. And I actually met him one day. It was the strangest meeting. He came into my shop and he said to me, he said, you look like the kind of guy that would be interested in making a lot of money. And I'm thinking, okay, well, you don't get in the telescope
I'll
business to
bite.
make a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it turns out he talked to me, and as he talked to me, I started to realize, wait a minute, are you this gentleman? I can't remember his last name, but his first
Yeah.
name was Bob.
Bob. Yeah.
And as soon as I mentioned the name of the company, his face went white. And he's actually coming in to sell me on some multi-level marketing scheme.
Oh, I see.
And his face went white and he didn't want to talk about it. And
Hmm.
I was kind of pleading with him to give me his contact information. And anyway, he left the materials on the counter and he took off. I never saw him or heard from him again. But he actually was the first local manufacturer of astronomical telescopes. And he built some very nice equatorial mounts. I did actually eventually end up owning one of his telescopes.
Hmm.
Bob Bredberg, that was his name, Bredberg Optical.
Okay. Well, there you go.
So yeah, that was a gentleman. So that was kind of the interesting. Now, what happened is when Bob Bredberg went bankrupt, Evan Efston from Efston Science bought up all his equipment and all the lenses
I see.
and all his inventory, and that got him launched in the surplus end of things as well. So yeah,
I see. I see.
yeah,
So
yeah.
now I did not, Edmund Scientific was a client of mine when I was working for Mead Instruments, down in New Jersey. But I had never, I did not know about Edmund being up in Canada. By the time that I'm introduced to Canadian astronomy dealers, Efson Science is there. You're there. There's a couple of others up in that region at that time that were, Lyrla Nature and some of these others that are up in Canada. But it's unusual to see. I mean, what's common to see in this industry, I'll just say it, is that many people come into the industry. They're around for a few years. They get in and they get out. Okay, because it's not an easy business, and it looks and it is. It's fun. It is exciting. It's rewarding, but it's tough. And for a number of reasons. From having to make short runs of products to the volatile nature of the business. You get a comet that comes around, or a Mars opposition, or something, and boom, sales go through the roof. You can't get equipment fast enough. And then on the other side of the event, okay, no one's really that interested in buying right now. So it can be very tough to try to smooth out those bumps and those hills and valleys and stuff. But you've done it. So congratulations, Ray. That is
Thank you.
that's testimony in itself. To be in the business for so long. Let's also talk about yeah. How long did you work at Epson Science? You were there for a while.
Yeah, I worked there not very long actually. It was about 2 years, and what happened was one day I got my paycheck, and in my paycheck there was a deduction of I think about $50 or $60. So I went into Mr. Epson's office. I said, "Well, what's this deduction for?" And he said, "Oh, remember that counter that we both carried last week across the showroom floor, and the top of it broke, the glass shattered?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, that's to pay for the replacement."
What? So you're on the job. You're on the job, right? And an accident
Yeah,
happens,
yeah,
and you had to pay
and
for it out of your own pocket.
yeah. I paid for the whole thing. I don't think he even paid his share, but he was quite the character, to say the
That's
least.
There are characters in this business, folks. So that's pretty funny. That's pretty funny. Oh my goodness.
Anyway, so
Well, you thought
needless
it
to
was
say,
time. Okay, that I need to move on.
well, needless to say, I wasn't too impressed with that.
No.
And then he had another gentleman working there, an Englishman actually. You
Oh,
know, a typical
another one.
typical
Yeah.
typical Englishman, but this is like your typical British stiff upper lip
Okay.
type of fellow who was a manager there by the name of Bernard Leach. And Mr. Leach was unceremoniously fired one day. He was actually the one that hired me and managed me and taught me how to sell, taught me some of the equipment. He was fired.
Oh.
And
Not because he hired you, right? I don't think that was the reason.
no, no, no. It was another equally ridiculous reason,
Oh no.
but
Oh
I
no.
won't get into it. But
No,
uh,
yeah.
anyway, a few months later, I got a call from Bernard, and he said, Ray, I'm over at this other business, which is the next company I went to work for, which was called the Scope Shop.
Okay.
Um, and he said they were a photo developing company, and they sold cameras at retail, um, camera lenses, for 2% profit, which is what it was in that industry. And he said to me, "We'd like to start a telescope store, but we need someone with the finesse and knowledge who knows the gear a little bit to manage it. Would you be interested?"
Yeah.
And so he approached me, and I said, "Well, yeah, sure, okay, let's have a conversation." The owner of the founder of PhotoQuick, which was at that time a 6 hour. So they developed a process of, you bring your film in at
Really fast
35 millimeter
turnaround.
film,
Yeah.
10 o'clock, pick it up at 5 o'clock. And so Walter Cosman hired me to basically develop a scope shop division.
Oh wow.
Uh, and so I had the opportunity of choosing the gear and the equipment. And of course, back in the day, it was, Tasco, Meade, Celestron. They were kind of the early Bushnell, Bausch and Lomb. They were the early players. So I cherry picked the product. And in fact, the gentleman in the photo you see there in the front with his
Oh, okay. Let's
hands around
jump
his
to
neck,
this.
uh, uh, he he's a good friend of mine. He walked into the shop when he was about 14 years old. That's
Yeah.
Bruno,
Okay.
and with his dad, and his dad was going to buy him a brand new telescope because he'd done so well in school. So he ended up buying him a Celestron 8 Schmidt
Okay.
Cassegrain, and yeah, we became fast friends. I've known him for years, and we've stayed in touch. So it's been great. Um, so I started the scope shop, and that went well for several years. We became we opened up another shop actually just west of Toronto that was run by someone else.
Hmm.
And we had the two operations going, and we also became the distributor for a line of products called Swift
Oh yeah. I knew
instruments.
Humphrey Swift, the old man. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the old man Humphrey Swift,
Yeah.
who made incredible binoculars and spotting scopes. Not so much telescopes, but they did have a line of telescopes.
Right. Yeah.
And so
We have
I
a
worked at the
comment.
scope shop.
We have
Mhm.
a comment here from which it would be appropriate to say right now. Jay Murphy says that we should thank him. He's referring to Evan Eston for being so mean. He said, where would you be now if he hadn't been so mean? So, and that's true.
Well,
That's true.
well,
You wouldn't have gone on and done all of these things and started up Conscope Center. So,
well, fair enough. He was the first in the list of meanies. The next one was Walter Cosmo. But anyway,
oh
that was,
no. So
uh,
it's just like one mean guy after another, huh? Damn.
well, it was a little different there. It was great working with Walter. He was a very religious man
Oh,
and
okay.
a Baptist Christian, and so when we would have meetings, and I asked, for example, for a raise and had an annual review,
Hmm.
um, his wife would sit in the corner and read from the Bible,
Okay.
and then it would be advised whether or not I was going to get a raise, depending on who said what.
Okay, so
Anyway, yeah. So what happened is one day I had one of these annual meetings with him,
uh-huh.
and he said, "Ray, I'm going to do something for you. That's to you." Sales were doing very well, by the way. Business was great. We were making a lot of money. I was making a lot of money for the company. I was making some good. I got paid a salary and commission, so I made good salary and
Oh, that's
commissions.
great. Good.
Yeah, it was great. So you think you'd be rewarded for all that. So he said, I'm going to do something. I'm going to restructure your commission. It's going to be to your benefit."
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
for the next 3 or 4 months, I kept seeing my paycheck go down every month, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, wasn't this supposed to be to my
Your
benefit?
benefit, it builds character is what it does.
Yeah, well, it certainly did. And that's when I kind of, I was newly married at the
Yeah.
time. We bought a house. We were planning to have a family, and so I thought, uh, now is probably, I was thinking about wanting to start my own business, but I didn't have a lot of money. So I
Yeah.
was thinking now is probably the best time to do this. But fortunately, because people in the industry, Mead and Slasron,
Yep.
for example, knew that I knew what I was doing, they kind of helped me out with launching the
Yeah.
business and getting
Yeah.
the credit lines and making a go of it. So we actually, our first store was about 400 square feet. It was on a second floor above a hamburger place called Fat Phil's, which was very busy. But the rent was cheap, and uh, I launched the business from there, and it never looked back. It took off right away
Well,
because essentially, I was the business at Scope Shop, if you
yeah.
will, and a lot of the customers followed me to the new business, which by the way wasn't called Con Scope Center.
Oh,
It had it was called Scope City Limited, and
it has a familiar tone and ring to it, that Scope City.
well, it does, because what happened next was we put an ad in some of the astronomy magazines,
Okay.
Sky and Telescope and Astronomy, launching, and it had the Scope City Limited name, and I got a registered letter in the mail from an American company called Scope City, run by a gentleman by the name of Maurice Zweiss.
Yes.
Um, and he basically said, "You're infringing on my legal right." And I'm thinking, wait a minute, we're in Canada, you're in America. And I wasn't really aware of his company. He said, cease and desist, or I'll sue you and take you to court. So at that time, there was a trade show coming up in Las Vegas back then it was called the Photographic Marketing Association,
PMA. Yep.
PMA, exactly right. And but Maurice was having PMS. Anyway, I, I said,
Maurice,
I
if you're
said,
watching this, uh,
yeah, hopefully. Anyway, I said, look, why don't we meet there and we can discuss this? And we met at the show. We had dinner together. He was actually very nice about it.
that's
And
yeah,
in fact, he also
very true.
told me,
True.
he gave me some great advice about, how to get the business going. And I'll never forget these words that he told me. He said to me, it's really not about selling telescopes. It's really about creating the vision in people's eyes that when they look at the night sky and they see something like the rings of Saturn, it's going to blow them away. And then that's what you want to sell. You want to sell the imagination. You want to sell that image that they're going to see, which is basically what captivated me when I looked through a telescope the first time and found Saturn in the rings. I couldn't believe it. It was amazing through a small 60 millimeter Tasco refractor.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. So I had a similar experience. I tell people I almost peed my pants when I saw. I was just, a lot of people see it in the eyepiece and they think, and I had that initial response too. It is so vivid, the rings, and to see the sphere, the planet ball in the center of it and stuff like that. You can't quite grasp that it's real. You think it's like a slide or something that's inside
Right.
there, and that's often the response that you get. And then once it really sinks in, it's like wow. And for many people, that's the tipping point. That's when they start exploring for real, and their mind opens up, and a shift is happening. So it's that shift that keeps people coming back again and again to someone like you to continue that journey. So that's fantastic, and a great story too.
Yeah,
um,
it's all true. So I very quickly had to change the name legally because, and so I just came up with my last name and Scope Center, and we registered that, and that was it.
yeah, yeah, that's great. That's great. Um, we have had more people join us here. Cesar Brolo is joining us from Argentina. We have people that regularly visit our show. Bergman Scooter is here. Dusty Haskins is here. Um, and Jay Murphy is having a very good time listening to this. So it's
Great.
great. All right, so there's this next shot that I have here. Maybe you can help us out with this. This shot is a gentleman standing in front of your store. This is Conscope Center, where it is today, right?
Yes,
Hmm.
precisely. That that gentleman is from the Montreal Royal Astronomical Society Center. His name is Bill Stropel. He's he's been to Cellophane, which is the astronomy convention, I think repeatedly over the years for many, many times. But he's a very knowledgeable amateur astronomer. And as a matter of fact, there was a telescope store in Montreal run by a lady called Harrison's. It was actually a 100-year-old telescope store, and it lasted over 100 years.
In
It was,
Canada.
yeah, in Canada. They sold, I think, cameras and anything, microscopes,
Uh-huh.
and 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 Bill managed to run it into the ground. But hey, Bill, just kidding.
It's a
But
tough business, let me tell you. It is. It's a tough business.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, it's a tough business. But Bill is extremely knowledgeable about optics and
Uh-huh.
knows a lot. So he comes by for a visit, and we meet at NEAF and we go out for dinner and chat and talk industry. But it's amazing, yeah, just how much knowledge he has. This is at Starfest
Okay.
with famed Canadian astronomer Terence Dickinson a few years
Yes.
back.
Now he has written. Oh my goodness, he was the editor of uh,
Sky News,
Sky News, which was the biggest and still is the biggest astronomy magazine, I believe, in Canada.
the only one. Yeah.
The only one. Okay, maybe
Hmm.
that's it. And Terry is, gosh, an icon of outreach. His book Night Watch was a mainstay, probably still is today, of many people that are getting started in the hobby. Has great maps in it. Has lots and lots of great information. Um, when I was running OPT, we would certainly carry this in the store, and so that's awesome to see you there with him. When was this picture taken?
I'd have to say, judging by the shirt I was wearing, probably maybe 5, 6 years ago,
Uh huh. Uh huh.
maybe longer. I'm not really good on the dates, but I will say that Terence Dickinson has probably done more to sell 6-inch Dobsonians than anyone in this industry, because in his book he touted them as
Sure.
being the best telescope you could buy, and everyone who read that book would come in and buy a 6-inch Dobsonian.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And absolutely, you can do a lot with a 6-inch Dob. Um, we're inside your store right now. I notice you gratuitously put a bunch of Explore Scientific stuff behind you. Thank you very much.
Just a coincidence.
Just a coincidence. That's very kind of you. I know that you sell all kinds of stuff, but let's see. Let's look at your presentation here, and you included this shot of one of the Bresser telescopes that we sell. This is our backpack edition, and this is looks like it's out over a lake in a
Well,
snowstorm.
yeah. Now, I lived on a place. It's about 7 hours northwest of Toronto for 10 years, called Manitoulin Island. It's actually the world's largest freshwater island.
Oh wow!
But I have several telescopes. I like to always try new telescopes out. But what I loved about this telescope, this Explorer Scientific Bresser 102S,
Hmm.
is I remember the gentleman that designed it, or claimed he designed it, was uh,
Sheldon Faworski.
good old Sheldon Faworski,
That's
another
right.
industry staple. And I thought this is a brilliant idea, making a refractor with a Newtonian focuser and having a reflecting mirror. He said he wanted to build the scope for years, and then you finally helped him bring it to fruition. And it's a great little telescope.
Yeah,
So I want to
we
try
still
it
have a
out.
few of them left, So it had a run. It was originally built for one of the bright comets that was coming around, and it comes with a backpack and a binocular, 7 by 50 binoculars with long eye relief, and a nice little metal tripod. And so, yeah, for a grab and go first telescope, 4-inch refractor, kind of an internalized diagonal. It's a neat design. It is.
Yeah, and it's really a fond memory of Sheldon because he's been around in this industry for a
Long time.
longer than any of us. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Um, and now my daughter has that telescope. She lives up in about 3 hours northwest of Toronto in Parry's Sound under dark skies on 30 acres. So she now has that telescope, and she's going to try some astrophotography with it. So it's going to be
Wonderful.
great.
Wonderful. I Sheldon still works with Explore Scientific. He's always kind of worked with us kind of part time and as a consultant and stuff, and he still works with us. We get some sort of challenging astrophotography question or something like that, and Sheldon loves astrophotography as well, and has his 2 or 3 observatories in his backyard, and so these days he's doing a lot of birding shots. So
Oh, interesting. You know, one of the best stories I remember about Sheldon is when he worked for Mead Instruments, and he came up to Starfest in Canada
I
to
know this
to
story.
yeah,
I know this
to
story.
rep. Well,
You're
I
going to
gotta share.
tell
It's
one of
such
the
a good story.
juiciest stories in the industry right now. So, oh
Exactly.
God,
So he came up to represent Mead Instruments, and he was giving a presentation on the products.
yes,
And at that time, Mead had some issues with some of their products,
yeah, like
and
their optics. Yeah,
people in yeah, and people in the audience were yelling him down and
brutal.
shouting at him. I think
It-
some some people threw some eyepieces or something at him. I don't know, but anyway, he said, "I'm never coming back to Canada."
Okay, so we're in California at this time, and I remember Sheldon going to this thing, and we heard about this like, I mean, it was fast. If the internet had existed at that time, you couldn't have got the information any quicker. Okay, it was uh, it was a big blow up at Mead Instruments as well, and a lot of crazy people there at that time. But what was true was is that at the time Mead was the optics in those early days was real hit or miss. This is before they had interferometers and or making good use of interferometers. They had like a simple one that they would use, but really could not tell what they needed to do to correct the optics to make them truly diffraction limited. And but they did, it's now that is water way under the bridge. The
Yeah,
optics that have been made for Mead Instruments for a very long time have been superb. So
yeah, they're incredible. They're consistently good.
yeah,
I got to hand it to them.
that's
They do a
right.
great job.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. They spent $1 million on this one machine to get better, and it did make them better. So not only the machine, but it was the techniques of using it and all of that. So yeah,
yeah.
that's true. Let's see. We were talking about Saturn earlier, and Dusty Haskins says, "I was just telling someone that today. Saw the rings, and my next words were, this could get expensive." That's right.
That's what we like to hear. That's what we like to hear.
Jay Murphy says, "Who would buy a 100-year-old telescope?" Well, you'd be surprised. Um, uh, Ansel would like to know. In fact, Ansel, I guess, is from India, but he lives in LA now. He says, how are the skies in your neck of the woods? Do you get a fairly decent number of clear night skies?
Okay, so in Toronto, um, we have a lot of light pollution, and because I'm spoilt with observing from very dark skies, I still observe from my backyard here in Toronto, but
Okay.
not as much. I prefer to go to a dark sky, like I'll be doing this weekend, going to where there's darker skies, um, and that's where I really like to observe from. So the planets are and some of the brighter objects you can see from a city backyard because planets aren't affected by light pollution as a rule. So you
Sure.
can see the moon, Jupiter, Saturn, all the planets are great right from the city. It's just the fainter objects which can be a bit more challenging. I mean, you can buy filters to help deal with that resolve the problem to some degree, but there's no substitute for dark sky.
Yeah. Someone else has joined us, a fellow dealer in this industry, and it's Dustin Gibson from OPT. He's
Good
watching
old
from
Dustin.
California. I believe you're in California. Um, and Dustin, we're going to have to do a show too. I'm looking forward to it. Dustin had me on his show, Gibson Picks, which he runs on Twitch, and he runs a fantastic show. He's got live remote observatory set up, and He lets people of all ages go in and take images and that kind of thing. So it's a pretty interesting thing. So, uh,
Well, I just got to say, Dustin's an incredible guy. I was touring California, and I was going down the coastal highway, and I dropped into OPT, and Dustin and his business partner, gave me a tour of his
mhm.
operation, showed me around, and he's just a really great guy. In fact, uh, when we were at NEAF a few years ago, wasn't too long ago, a couple of years ago, he and his OPT team had set up some telescopes in Times Square, and I remember getting some
Oh yeah,
the cops. Yeah, the cops came along and basically said, no, you can't do this.
can't do this.
Yeah, and
Oh,
that looks
you
like.
can do anything else on Times Square. You can pass out drunk on Times Square, but you can't set up a telescope, right?
So yeah, and you try to fake it like they had a permit or something, but
Yeah,
anyway, we couldn't pull it off. But it was great while it was lasted. While it lasted, it was a lot of fun.
yeah,
So yeah, Dustin's a great guy. He's one of the good people in this industry. So it's nice that he's here.
yeah. Gary Palmer says, I thought Canada shared the same weather as the UK. You just chuck it across the pond on the jet stream.
Pretty much.
Pretty much. That's right. Um, okay, so our next image here is some scopes in your shop.
Yeah.
Look
Hmm.
at this. Why don't we talk about what kind of, I mean, when I walk in there, I mean, you're just showing a few of the scopes. I think you've had like over 100 telescopes on the floor at the same time.
We have. It's really crowded, in my opinion, too many telescopes on the floor, if there can be such a thing. So now, with this situation with COVID, we're doing some renovations to kind of the store is under renovation right now to kind of make things more accessible, a
Hmm.
little less crowded. But we also sell a lot of new and used telescopes. So we just I've always believed in having a large inventory of telescopes. That's always been my business philosophy. And because, when people want a telescope, they kind of want it now. They don't want to be told they have to wait
Well, that's true.
2, 3 weeks,
True.
4 or 5 months, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So my philosophy has always been try to have the inventory on hand.
Well, also too, having it on the floor, people can actually really see it. They can talk to a knowledgeable person about it right there at the moment. A lot of people spend a long time thinking about, what it is, how to put their telescope system together, and I more than once I've met people that have spent 3, 4, 5 years before they decided to buy that telescope. Just kind of solving in their mind what that combination of product might be like. And so, it's something where I always recommend people get involved in their astronomy community first, so they understand what that support structure is like. And then, if they have binoculars or something, or even a small department store telescope, get it out. Start looking through the telescope and start exploring, and then certainly hook up with a trusted dealer, so that you can go in and get the right information that you need. Um, and you're not going to see this much equipment on display in very many shops in the world right now. This is, most of us in the telescope space. I like that telescope space. Have have had to, it's the modern world. Everything's online right now. So how do you solve that? How do you reach out to people? I do it by going to a lot of astronomy events, but I can't do that right now. And so it's nice that I can come in and visit you online, and to bring a lot of this, the kaleidoscope of the industry and the community, to you on these programs. So, um, and so what else can you tell us about Conscope Center, Ray?
Recently with this COVID situation, we had to close down our retail store. In fact, it's still closed and won't likely reopen till mid-July while we do the reorganization and make it COVID-19 friendly, if you will.
Yeah.
For many years I've worked in the management of the company. I haven't actually worked in the retail operation, and so we had to lay off some staff that were here, and so in order to maintain social distancing, I've had to come down and actually work in the retail operation. I can't tell you what a joy it's been to actually reconnect with people again, deal with them one-to-one. It just sort of brought back a re-enthusiasm in my life
Oh,
about
sure.
the business and the hobby and why I got into it in the first place. And that's something that when you're working in the back office, doing the buying, the selling, and
The managing the business.
promotions and the managing the business, I didn't realize how much I really missed that. So it was just great to come back and talk to people, connect, helping them buy the right gear. People really appreciate it, and so that's made a big difference. So we also do servicing and repairs. There's
Oh, yeah. Let's jump to that.
we upgrade software. We repair LX200 computerized telescopes and Celestron computerized scopes, because shipping your telescope down to California to get it repaired doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And sometimes people are very uncomfortable with opening up a sophisticated telescope to try to get to repair. But
Sure.
I have a depth of experience with it. I've been in this business a long time, so along the way I've learned a few tricks here and there about repairing these things. And so that's an important component of our business too, serving the needs of people that have equipment that breaks down, because being computerized telescopes are sophisticated. There's many moving parts, as you know, and sometimes they break. So
Yes, they do. Yes, we do. And it's having to go through the border, waiting for it to come back. All that stuff is something that would concern anyone living in any country. Where you had to send your scope away to get it repaired. I had a Swiss watch, and I remember having to send my Swiss watch to a place in New York that would prepare it to send it to, you know, Switzerland to get
right, right,
uh,
yeah,
get fixed, and then it would come back to the New York place, and then the home office would send it to me, and I had to do this twice, and it took months to get it done, so. And
yeah.
if I had just been able to come to my local watch guy and for that person to work on it and get it done so I could be on my way, it would have been a much happier camper, So that's awesome that you offer that. Uh,
Yeah, well, those local watch guys don't exist anymore either. So
that's
yeah,
true. That's true. But you do exist.
yeah,
Dustin Gibson said he had to move on and mentioned that you have a beautiful shop and operation, and he says thanks for all I do for the community. Great stream. Um, Bob Johnson says, "Hey guys, how do you feel that internet sales are affecting the sales in brick and mortar stores, since online sales are now spread out to quite a number of countries?"
yeah. That's a good question. Um, Definitely, we are affected by some of the big players like Amazon and other companies who essentially come into Canada. And I mean, I'll just take it back a step.
Okay.
In Canada, we had our own problem a few years ago with a company that opened up for business by the name of Canadian Telescopes. I don't know if you remember them,
Sure.
but they were a mail order firm, and there were several businesses that they put under because of the type of selling and marketing tactics that they used. They would sell below cost and ship for free, and some of these smaller dealers especially in smaller communities, just couldn't compete, and they went out of business, and it was unfortunate. We were also hurt by them too, because the whole idea, I think, was basically to come in and decimate all the competition, and then slowly rise the prices up again to get all the business. But the point is, when you start selling at below cost, the more you sell, the more you lose. And eventually it caught up with them, and they went bankrupt too. But they did a lot of damage while they were here. And so, we feel some of that effect from companies like Amazon, of course, but we're able to compete on different levels. And one of them is that if you're going to buy, say, an expensive computerized telescope or a big apochromatic telescope, it's nice to be able to talk to someone that can actually give you some guidance and direction. You're not going to get that from Amazon. You're just going to get
No, no, there's
uh,
no one at Amazon you can call and say,
yeah,
what's better, FCD 100 glass or FPL 53 glass, or exactly which field flattener do I need? What's your
right,
opinion on this narrowband filter? Okay,
yeah,
not
yeah,
going to get that.
exactly.
You can read reviews, and you can read reviews until you go blind, and then no longer have any ability to do any astronomy.
Well, a lot of people tell me that as they get overwhelmed by reading so much
Oh yeah,
information,
yeah, yeah.
and
But
then
you got to get
I'll
hooked
talk,
in that loop, where you're never doing it. You're never actually doing the astronomy. Now, I do recommend that you buy, and you buy well. And when I mean what I mean by that, that doesn't mean the cheapest price. Okay, that means that you
exactly.
buy a system that's going to be really productive for you and that has the support. Okay, when something goes wrong, you're going to be able to come back and get that fixed rapidly. In the professional world of astronomy, it's about scope productivity. Okay, and that's what's going to that's the machine that's getting the science done. And so um, the cost is of course a consideration, but it's secondary to how productive it's going to be. And so you want to have a system that's productive for you. And the good news is that there's a lot of great brands out there. There's a lot of great equipment, and Raycon sells almost all of it. So that's something to consider there. You
Well,
you mentioned a couple of other things. I'm going to you told this some stories already. You mentioned something about Focus Scientific, Perceptor, Malincam,
yeah, yeah. These are all
Subcon
other Canadian.
telescopes.
Yeah, there's a number of other Canadian companies, and for example, let me take another manufacturer that not very many people really know much about. That would be Sky Instruments, run by a gentleman by the name of Glenn Spears. But he's a bit of a mystery in the industry because he maintains a very low profile, but he makes a line of products under the moniker of Antares, and he's just been in business for years. He started out actually with selling Skywatcher products with Pacific Telescopes. So it was a distributor in Canada before they folded a few years ago and shifted everything to Skywatcher USA. But I mean, we've had some great people in this industry in Canada producing great products. And Glenn, he's a very interesting character in the sense that, like his sport hobby is racing cars,
Oh wow.
and
Okay.
that's an expensive hobby. But he's
It
also
is.
very clever at, yeah. So you got to sell.
Yeah,
So he
you
keeps
think
designing.
telescopes are expensive. Racing cars is way more expensive. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but that's what he likes to do. But not many people know that. But not many people know who he is. But he, again, is one of these people who just quietly works away. He designs different eyepieces. He comes out with new products. He started with a line of telescopes years ago, which were actually really crappy. They were called Omcon. That was way back in the 70s and 80s. But gradually over the years, the product improved, and it was really great to have a Canadian manufacturer producing telescopes that we could sell.
Oh sure.
Now, most of what he does is, imported overseas like everyone else, but he still designs. I've had some of my customers and employees, go into the telescope business, and I made it look like it's really easy. And so they thought, yeah, well, if Ray can do it,
Oh
anyone can
yeah,
do it.
anybody can do it, right?
Sure. And then they'd go into business. So, a few companies that, recently closed up was one that was in Richmond Hill, again, called New Eyes Old Skies. That was run by two former employees who worked at Epson Science. And
Okay.
Epson Science, by the way, eventually folded, went out of business. And it was really sad because that's actually a company that could have grown. But unfortunately, sometimes when people who don't have an interest to be in this business, in my opinion, you really have to have a passion and an interest in the hobby. You can't just be selling these things as commodities. You have to know the product. You have to use it. You want to have to enjoy it. And so when someone takes over a company and they're in it strictly to make money, it doesn't work. And unfortunately, Epson Science, while it was a great company, and actually only just 3 blocks down the road from us, I might add.
Hmm.
So went under because people that were running it didn't really care about
Yeah, the building.
astronomy.
I think the building is still there, and they have this big telescope that's still
Yes,
there.
it's it's
That's got to be a
it's
story in itself.
well, it is. It's actually considered a Toronto landmark now. So until the telescope topples over, but which could be any day. But the yeah, I want to buy that telescope from them, but they wouldn't sell it to me. So it's still up there. But it's great because it reminds everyone to keep looking up.
Yeah.
Um, so there's we used to have a company called it was called KW Telescope. KW Telescopes is still in business. It was called run by John Kidner, Perceptor,
Yeah, I remember
many
John
years
Kidman.
ago,
Sure.
and his wife Suzanne.
Yeah,
Unfortunately,
great people.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah, wonderful people. Unfortunately, John was an accountant. He got cancer, and Suzanne couldn't keep it going. It was sad. And then we have Rock Malin, who's in Ottawa, who manufactures
The
the
Mellencamp.
world fate the Malin Cam. Yeah.
Right.
And then Jim Kendrick,
Kendrick. The
who used to
heaters, the
own
zappers, and lots of
exactly. So
accessories, right?
so we have some really cool people who've been in the manufacturing end of things, and then also in the retail end of things too. At one time, we actually had an optical manufacturer of large instruments. I think you have a slide of it, of a large telescope that was actually manufactured here in
Oh, I
Canada.
don't. I don't. I must be missing it. But
Oh,
yeah.
okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was called Heinz Optical,
Okay.
and I actually met the manufacturer quite by accident. One day I was in a steakhouse having dinner, and I was talking to my wife at the time about astronomy, and this gentleman looks over and he says, "Oh, you're interested in astronomy?" And we start chatting. He'd had a few drinks by that time, and then by the end of the evening, he asked us to join him and his wife, so we did. And it turns out he was actually the manufacturer of these large Dal-Kirkham Cassegrain telescopes that were manufactured here in Toronto and sold. And so,
Wow.
yeah, we have a great history of telescope
Yeah.
manufacturing
And you have
and
some great
innovate.
astronomers from Canada. Jack Newton,
Yeah, absolutely.
world renowned. David Levy, one of the great comet discoverers of all time from Canada. There's got to be a
Yeah,
long list, so that's great. A huge tradition in astronomy and science in Canada. So much of it from
yeah.
the Toronto area, Montreal area too. So
Well, the first black hole was discovered by Dr. Tom Bolton and with the David Dunlap Observatory back in I think it was 1976. So
hmm,
yeah,
there.
we have a good history here.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. A couple of comments. Bob Johnson says, "Thank you for your views. By the way, Ray, I have been into your shop several times. Very nice facility. I enjoyed my times there as I love to window shop almost as I like to buy." That's very kind. Um, Philip Guest, Ray keeps a very entertaining presence with his email list. If you want to follow on with this, you'll go to Scope Center to the website, and which is actually in this posting, and you can link right in. He said with his email list, with his bold opinions about current issues, a refreshing way to keep his potential market engaged. I keep subscribed for that as much as that for his interest in equipment. So it's true. I get his emails too, and Ray has a I'm not going to say a twisted sense of humor, but he's got a sharp wit. So
Well, let's just say I'm not politically correct in any form
no.
or sense of the word. So if you're easily offended,
Maybe
you might want
don't.
to
No.
run to your safe space before you subscribe.
Right, right. Um, anyhow, we have a gentleman, Perseus Blayad, who says he would like for you to gift him one of your telescopes. So you'll have to take that up with Raycon. Um, well, we've had a lot of nice comments tonight. We have learned a lot about Conscope Center. Uh, you know, you mentioned something about retirement. You've been in this business for over 40 years. What's your horizon like, right?
Well, I was asked that question by various people all the time, and you
Mm,
know, quite honestly, when the subject of retirement comes up, um, I can't see myself really wanting to retire anytime soon, primarily because I can't really draw a line between having fun in this business and working.
yeah,
So, if that makes any sense. So, to me, what I do brings me great joy. So, why would I want to stop doing that? And yes, the subject of retirement gets broached many times. Comes up, when are you going to slow down? And I say, yeah, one day I will. I think I first said that maybe 18 years ago when I was asked, can you slow down a bit? And I just, I'm like the Energizer Bunny. I just keep
yeah,
ticking and keep going because I love it. I really can't differentiate between work and play in
yeah.
this business because it's so much fun. And I got to say, we've had so many wonderful customers over the years, and I've seen many of them grow and get, and now we're starting to lose some of them because as they age and
Of course.
get older.
Yeah,
And the big challenge we
sadly.
have now is to bring the younger people into the hobby and keep it interesting and keep them going. So there's been some great innovations in the industry
Right.
towards that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's true. That's true. Yeah, and it just seems like there's this new wave of technology really centered on astrophotography right now and backyard astrophotography with the narrowband imaging. So it's and a lot of the people that are actually listening tonight are involved in that. So, uh, well, we really appreciate all the years of business. You were one of Explore Scientific's first dealers. You might have been a first dealer for many of us in the industry, and we owe you a great debt of thanks. And I really am pleased and honored that you appeared on our show tonight and took the time out to share your store and your experiences and the good times. And it doesn't seem like you've had very many bad times. So, I know it's been rough from time to time, but you're a survivor. Um, and yeah, that's what it takes to be in this business is you need to be able to turn the steering wheel of your business when it needs to be turned. And so you've done that, Ray, and so congratulations. And I hope that we can get together again in the future to do another broadcast like this. You're a very good interview, and I'm sure you have. We've only touched on the tip of the iceberg of all your stories.
Yeah. I might have to write. I might have to write a book on all the
You
stories because there's
might.
so many, uh, and some of them I can't really state here publicly. So it's been great. It's been an honor. Thank you for inviting me to join you this evening. It's been a lot of fun. I had a great time. And Scott, I got to say, you've been in this industry a long time. You've done a tremendous job, and I'm really really pleased that you've continued to move forward with your company right now,
Yeah.
and you're taking things in a new direction. So congratulations to you too.
Well, it's all about just showing up. So I kept showing up even with even with all my warts, all my misgivings, all my mistakes, all the names I get wrong, all the stuff I forget, whatever, I still wake up and I come out and I do it again. So,
Yeah, right. Exactly. You
right.
just gotta you just gotta show up.
You
Yeah,
got to show
that's it.
up. You got to keep showing up. That's right. And we will show up. We've got more shows coming. Monday, we've got our Open Go To community show coming up with Jerry Hubble and Kent Martz, people that use the Open Go To system and are in the Open Go To community. We have other shows coming up on Explore Now as well with astrophotographers and dealers, and so we're going to show you the wide universe of amateur astronomy here on this program, Explore Now. You guys have a good night. Have a great weekend, and thanks for joining. Thank you, and thanks, Ray. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye bye.